Steve Gould from the Police See podcast. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Patrick. I'm happy to be on.
Yeah, as I fumble the intro here, it's the
A
thing.
man after my own heart.
Yeah, it's Things Police See podcast, right?
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, which is wildly popular, by the way. You're getting some really good traction.
Yeah, it's been good. It's for a non-celebrity hosted nobody podcast, it does. I'm happy with it. If you had told me 5 years ago it'd be where it is now, I would have never believed it. But it's I think it gets to the right people, the right audience.
Yeah, I think so too. It's awesome. And I've been a guest on there at least once, maybe twice. I think
Did
at
you come
least
back for
once.
Cops in the News?
Yes, I did do
Yeah,
Cops
so
in the
twice.
News.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I've been on
yeah,
there twice, so I'd be more than happy to come back. It's always fun chatting
excellent.
with you.
Heck yeah, yeah, man. You had some great ones. You had the one about the 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 weird the guy in the back of a van in a warehouse.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was so weird. I love the weird ones. The intense. I asked, the five questions I ask, and the bizarre. I always am looking forward to hearing what the bizarre, strange ones are, because cops just doesn't matter. Small town, big city, cops they're on duty 24 hours, and they go to all the weird stuff.
Oh, all day long. And I was prepping for this and I listened to our old podcast, and there's stuff that I forgot about that, we were talking about. And I'm like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's right. That cat was eating that guy's toes. I
that's
forgot
right.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It just yeah, it's just this old lady was just so matter of fact. She's still wearing her house coat and slippers. There's a corpse on her sidewalk, and she was so proud that she chalked out the outline on the stairs where the kid fell.
What a good little helper.
Oh yeah, and she still had the chalk in her hand, and I'm just like, oh my God, it's like Grandma Moses is, and she was so proud, and I'm like, wow, this is so funny. But anyways, let's get into this. How did you start out in law enforcement? Where did all that begin?
Well, I was raised by a cop. Um, a
Okay, that'll
cop
do
that was a
it.
cop that kind of became a cop because the job was available and it provided benefits and my mom was pregnant type of. That's kind of how he got into it. I don't think my dad really ever had any any real true ambition to be a cop, but they
Okay.
needed him. It was like the late 70s, early 80s, and
Ah,
there
okay.
was like the back to the street grant or whatever, federal grant to
Mm.
for towns and cities to hire cops, and then the deal was it would, I think the grant would pay for their salaries for 3 years, and then the town or city had to keep them after that. So he
Oh,
kind of got in on that. But all that to say, yeah, I was raised by a cop. I'm the whole thing. Like he would come home for meals and uniform, and at the age of like 3, I was obsessed with guns. Let me hold your gun. Let me see your gun. So I really always held law enforcement in a good light, and especially because my father's a good and moral man and was a great father, is a great father. But my first job, believe it or not, was in the same town on Cape Cod. I was in college, and having grown up on boats and being very good at boat handling and all that, I knew the tides and the bays and the ocean. The harbor master had an opening for seasonal patrol boat operators,
hmm.
and I saw that. My dad was like, "Hey, you ever think about doing that?" I'm like, "Yeah, am I qualified? Like, can I do that?" I was like 18. And my dad's like, "The harbor master's boat basically most worried about somebody who can drive a friggin' boat. He'll teach you the shellfish laws and the harbor master laws. No training required, just knowledge of the local area." So I got that job, and it was very much like t-shirts and khaki shorts, and we had um, 3 patrol boats, one in each body of water on Cape Cod in the town of Orleans. And that was it, man. It was like, hey, people are going fast through the slow no wake zone. Go down there in the patrol boat and holler at them to pull over to you if you got to tell them to slow down. And here's a citation book if you want to write them a slow no wake ticket.
Really? Wow. So you weren't like deputized or trained or?
No, we were sworn in
Oh, you were.
as
Okay.
as special police officers, assistant harbor masters, and deputy shellfish constables. So
Shellfish constables.
so
I have
with
never heard of such a thing. Okay.
yeah, this job and the first full-time law enforcement job I had are very unique to a coastal town or specifically Cape Cod, where they have to have a harbor master if your town touches salt water, and you have to have a shellfish constable. And these
Wow.
guys, by the laws are old. These are very old laws, and the harbor master and shellfish constable have the right to arrest. They have authority to make in custody arrests, um, all that stuff. Stop vehicles, like but there's no training at all.
Yeah, what could go wrong there, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just always been so quaint. But at one point, the Mass Criminal Justice Training Council tried to have a harbor master academy, and they've ran it like 2 or 3 times because just truly you do respond to calls on the water, and also you get sent out for rescues all times a day. You might get called out
Okay.
at 3 in the morning for an overdue boater, and you're working with the Coast Guard to call in legs on a GPS coordinates in the
Mhm.
ocean. Like it's a pretty serious job that traditionally is worked by like the assistants are usually like college kids, usually going to like a mass maritime academy or something. So
Mm.
when I look back on it now with all the reform that's happened in law enforcement in the last decade, it is pretty wild to think like, yeah, you had all the authority of a police officer assigned to Marine Patrol, but you were just a kid with no training.
Now, you weren't armed or anything like that, were you?
No, we weren't armed.
Okay.
We had like a little harbor master badge we wore in our belt.
Yeah, there you go.
But usually we just kept it in our pocket because I think we were embarrassed of it. But it was cool to have a badge in your wallet at 18. You know, it said
Oh, sure.
harbor master department, and the boss there, Dawson, was just a great guy, super smart. I think he was the youngest harbor master in Massachusetts history. He got the job at like 22.
Mm,
So he's in charge of the fleets on that part of Cape Cod. Like if a storm comes, he gives the order to force people to pull their boats or bring them to a cove for protection. He sets
yeah.
the navigational markers, gives a shellfish grant permit. So it's a very political and powerful. Like you have a lot of power in that position on Cape Cod, and he was like 22 when he got it. But
Wow.
he graduated from I think URI with like a 4.0, like just a smart kid. I remember before I was harbor master, I saw him on the news a few times getting interviewed about storms, and everybody in the community was like, man, this guy talks really well. Like he talks like
Yeah.
he's a 45-year-old vet, you know?
Dang.
So yeah, I worked for him, and that was I did that 5 summers
That
of
sounds like
harbor
a great
patrol.
job, though.
Oh my gosh, he was cool. He'd be like, hey, if it's slow out there or if you get overheated, just pull it in the middle of the bay and um go ahead and go for a swim. Just strip down to your boxers, jump in. I mean, it was cool, man.
No, that sounds great. Were you also a diver? Did you get all your diving certs?
I did get my diving certs while I was there, but it wasn't an application for the job. They
Okay.
didn't have a dive team or anything.
All right. So
Yeah.
where did you go from there?
From there, I went to college for 4 years. While in college, I continued to come home and do that job in the summer. And then I graduated from college because I'm at college, and I always liked computers and gadgets and things. So you know how it is when you ask an 18-year-old, what's your major? It's like
Right.
asking you to decide your life
Yeah,
at
true.
18. So I was like, well, I'll just do computers. So I was a computer information systems major, which I actually ended up graduating with that degree because after one semester, I took an elective class, which was criminal justice, and I just loved it. I was like, this
Yeah.
is great. A retired trooper taught the class, and he was like,
Ooh,
it was
cool.
half teaching and half war stories, and I'm like,
Sweet.
damn, this is great. So I called my dad, and I was like, I want to be a criminal justice major, and my dad's like, pump your brakes, slow down.
Yeah.
He's like, you can be a police officer with a high school diploma. Why don't you get the computer degree? And I had a concentration in business management. He's like, get that degree. And then if you're still hell bent on police work, you can still do that too, but don't pigeonhole yourself with the CJ degree. Was his advice.
He's a wise
So
man. Let me tell you, he's very wise.
yep. Yep. So I graduated college, doing that hard master job the whole time. And I went to work for Bankers Life Insurance for 2 months on break one day. I hated it. On break one day, you're inside a lot. You're in cubicles and on the phone, and I'm like, oh my! At like 22, I'm like, this job stinks. This is like
Sure.
such a ladyboy job. You know what I mean? I don't want to be pushing papers. So I opened the newspaper that they had in the break room, and the town of Yarmouth was hiring for a full-time marine natural resource officer. So this would be, pretty unique to Cape Cod and coastal communities, but you're sworn in as police, badge, gun. authority, you're sworn, but you mostly enforce conservation laws, harbor
Mm,
master laws, shellfish laws, some animal control stuff. It's kind of like an agency that collects all these other tasks that the police department is too busy to really assign people to. Like I think
okay.
they had like a 70 or 75 man police department, but still with all the waterways and hunting and ATVing and boating going on, they would have to hire another dozen people to assign to specialty units for the summer to
Okay.
handle this, so that the natural resource department kind of fell under that. And this was kind of, for me, like it was like a level up. So I was like an assistant harbor master in the summers, and this was like full-time job. You get your own big green truck with blue lights assigned to you, and you're they required at the time. And when I was at college, I should say, I went to the intermittent police academy, which they used
Mm,
to allow in Massachusetts. So
okay.
this is a police academy that is shorter and done on weekends or at nights, and you get the ability to be commissioned or certified as a police officer in Mass without going through the full-time police academy.
Oh, wow.
So, and that's all this job required. It
Now,
required a
was that a
minimum.
state job?
No, it
Was
was a town job.
Oh, okay. Yeah. See, like in Wisconsin, we didn't have any like the DNR, Department of Natural Resources, conservation wardens, all that. That's all state. We don't, it doesn't get
Yep.
broken down by like town or city or anything like that.
Only on Cape Cod is it broken down by town, because we do have the Mass Environmental Police who we worked with
Okay.
on the Cape, but the Cape wants more coverage, and they have the money from the tax revenue, so
Oh, okay.
they have these bigger departments.
Do you remember how much you made on your first police job?
I do, and believe me, I felt like I was rich. I started at 37,000 a year.
Ooh, what year was that?
2000 and oh, two, 2002, 2003,
Okay.
around there. And is 37,000 a year. I think it was like 1791 an hour or something like that.
Yeah. My first day in the academy was January 16, 1995. And we started out at, it wound up being around 26,000 a year,
Yeah,
somewhere
wow.
in that ballpark. And I thought I was rich because,
Yeah.
I had a 4-year degree in sociology. And, what that, I was qualified to be a restaurant manager, used car salesman,
Right.
bartender, until I
Yeah.
got the cop job.
Yep.
And I thought I just died and went to heaven. I'm just like, are you kidding me? And I get 2 days off in a row.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Every Friday, me and my
Benefits?
buddies
What are
were in the
those?
yeah, exactly. I don't need those. I'm healthy.
Yeah.
Every Friday, me and my buddy were in the pub with our paycheck. Like, what do we have this? What do we have to? We don't need to save this money. Let's do it.
Outstanding. So you do that type of work, and where did that take you?
So I did that for 4 years,
Okay.
and I really did enjoy it, but it was limiting where um, there wasn't a lot of overtime. There wasn't a lot of like extra duty pay,
Mm,
and I kind of needed that because Cape Cod, I don't know if you know, but the real estate market there has just been going upwards for as long as it's existed. So
sure.
it's has
It
skyrocketed
sounds
now.
expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a peninsula that sticks out in the ocean with some of the best rated beaches in the country. So it's expensive. And it was getting to the point where my dad kind of pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, you need to buy a house here or you're never going to be able to live here." Because I was renting like an apartment with my buddy, and hence the extra money. I think we were paying
Sure.
200 bucks a month each,
Oh God.
and making like, whatever it was, 500 or 600 a week.
Wow.
So taking home 500 or 600 a week. And
Yeah.
so he said, we'll loan you the down payment for a home. You'll have to pay us back. So he loaned me like, I think, 30 grand.
Wow.
And I looked at the mortgage and all that. And I also had inklings of like, doing the natural resource stuff was fun, but I really wanted to get more into, hooking people up, doing
Sure.
investigations that weren't,
Police work. Yeah.
yeah, more like police work stuff. So I just kind of started applying to local police departments to try to get on. And I knew that the big thing was I would have to then go to a full-time academy. Like they did not
Sure.
accept the part-time academy, which was fine. I was, I think, 26 or 27 when I went through, but
Yeah, that's not bad.
no, it's not bad. I was one of the older guys actually, but we did have a retired postmaster in my academy that was like 47. So
Wow.
yeah, and he's one of these guys, he's a beanpole. So the physical stuff for him was like nothing. He just had trouble with the drill and ceremony. Like
Oh,
he's one of those guys they'd about face you and he's facing you. You're like,
yeah.
but yeah, so I went through the full-time academy, which is it's not nothing. Like I started running beforehand and made sure I wouldn't embarrass myself and all that.
Sure.
Um, but went through the full-time academy, got on a local PD, and from there I did about 10 years with that place, and it was great. I went through academy with a buddy of mine from high school, and yeah, it was good, man. Cape Cod's a weird place to police. It's like your town will be 5 or 6 thousand in the winter, and then in the summer it could be 40,000 people, but
Sure.
you don't really get that many more cops. It's just you're just jamming for 4 months, and
Okay.
then everybody kind of leaves, so it's kind of a weird place to police.
So you're a Cape Cod PD.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So you did that for 10 years. Then what happened?
Then we had a little bit of a wanderlust early midlife crisis, my wife and I.
Okay.
Luckily we had it at the same time and we're in agreement. And it didn't happen overnight. Like it was one of those things where, I'd been on the job 10 years and I was like, man, am I gonna, and this is where we were born and raised too. So
Okay.
we started thinking like, is this like, are we just going to choose to am I going to do 20 more years here and retire and then this will be it? Or should we do something else? Should we look at something like, well, there's other places in the country are so beautiful. We had a camper and we'd been traveling and visited other places. And you kind of always, when you visit, kind of imagine like, what would it be like to live here? You know what I mean?
Right.
So we kind of had that in our heads. And after a lot of talks over a couple of years, probably we decided, I was like, you know what? We can definitely give this a shot. We had two young kids, but I'm like, my resume's decent. There's no reason we couldn't rent our Cape Cod house, which will rent like, you know,
Sure.
overnight, and take our camper and go west, young man. Just go
Okay.
out there and see what it's like. So I filed a application with I found a background investigator for LAPD spot open online.
Hmm.
And all I knew was that you didn't have to be sworn. You could be a civilian to do the job. And I wasn't really interested in like going somewhere and then going through their catch up academy or their full
Yeah.
academy. So I said, all right, looks interesting. They probably pay okay. They're looking for people with a lot of experience to vet young officers and firefighters also to do their backgrounds to get them on the job. So I filed this application online. It was long. I mean, it was like 30 pages typed out
Wow.
statements and all that. I never heard a word. Like 3, 4, 5, 6 months went by. Never heard anything. We leave anyways. Spend like a month and a half going across the country, stopping at all the sites. Grand
Yeah.
Canyon, Nashville, Tennessee, any place you can think of. We went kind of the mid to southern route. Land in LA, outside LA in San Dimas. San Dimas football rules. If you remember Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Oh, yeah.
But so
Yeah, oh,
we
yeah. Yeah. Okay.
we pull it. That's all I knew about San Dimas. And then we pull in and we pull in at night. In the morning, the sun's coming up, and I step out of our camper, and it's like November, and there's snow-capped mountains, palm trees, and the sun coming up in this
Wow.
beautiful campground. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, this is like another planet to us. This is
Sure.
crazy. And we'd had a friend who lived in LA and we'd visited there before, and we're like, yeah, let's try outside there. Let's try that area. The makeup is, I mean, the geography is incredible. We've only, as East Coasters, we've only ever just heard and saw pictures and really like about LA. I'm like, seems cool. And this was before um Trump was elected and all that. Cause I tell you right now, when Trump got elected, they never stopped losing their minds. Like when we left 4 years later, the city was like literally on fire in spots. It was like
Wow.
it just like the what do they call it, Trump derangement syndrome was like citywide. It was crazy. But so we pulled in there, and I ended up getting a call like 3 or 4 weeks later from backgrounds, and they were like, hey, do you want to come in for an interview? And I was like, oh, this is perfect. I'm like, I thought you guys forgot about me. They're like, no,
Yeah.
we got your resume, and are you here now? Do you live here? And that was their big thing. They saw a application from Massachusetts, and they were like,
Sure.
this guy's never coming here. But now once they confirmed that I was in state, they invited me down um to do it. And it was, it was a pretty extensive interview. I mean, they had role playing in the interview. Like they had
Oh, wow.
a person come in and pretend to be a candidate and be like, they lied to you. How would you decipher this? There was a writing exercise. Um, that you, I think they just want to make sure you could read and write, but they ask
Uh,
you like, write about a moment in your career as a police officer that you felt like you helped someone. And actually, I'll tell that story later.
okay.
So it was this whole thing, and they were like, "Hey, we like you, we want to hire you, but we only ever offer this job part time first."
Ooh,
And I was like, "Geez," I said, "I got a family, and we're about to go on, California's healthcare here because my Cobra is going to run out from
right.
the coast, and I didn't know you only hired part time." They're like, "Yeah, this is just how we do it. We like to get a feel for you."
Mm,
And I'm like, "Oh man!" So oddly enough, I get a call 2 weeks later, and they would like to have you in for an interview. And you know how big cities are? Like these are not the same. This is all disjointed. So I'm like,
right.
"Well, I already came in." She said, "All I can tell you is you're on the list for an interview. Do you want it?" And I'm like, "Yes." So I go in, and I'm not joking. Same questions, same people,
Oh,
same role player, same scenario,
oh my gosh.
minus the writing exercise.
Okay.
So now I'm confused. I'm like, what the is it so poorly run here that they don't remember me? Like this is
And this is
bizarre.
LAPD, right?
Yeah, well, it's run by the personnel. There's a public safety bureau within the personnel department that
Oh,
employs background investigators for LAPD and LAFD.
okay. Okay.
It's a weird umbrella, but yes, they like a portion of the background investigators that work in the LAPD backgrounds unit are sworn, and a portion are civilian. And I
Okay.
think we're managed by the civilian, and then the
Mm,
LAPD manages their own people within the civilian unit.
gotcha. All right.
They did this years ago to have, the city was like, we need civilians doing backgrounds, and then LAPD's like, sure, we'll just get ex cops.
Yeah.
We'll get retired
Right.
cops.
That's what we do in Milwaukee. It's all retired ex-cops. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They're like, now we got your civilians.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I came in, and then they called, and the manager of the unit called, Rafael Casillas, who's actually a awesome guy. He was the general manager of the place. He was a CHP guy that got in a shootout, got injured, and ended up
Mm,
falling into backgrounds. Just the nicest guy. And he's like, Steve, I got great news for you. Do you want to be full time? And I'm like, yes, I very badly would like to work full time. And he's like, yeah, because we don't. I go, I know you usually don't do this, right? He's like, yeah, but they want you to be full time. They liked you. And I was like, oh, thank the Lord. I'm like, yeah,
yeah.
they're like, we need to fingerprint you and all that. And I said, he's like, when can you be here? I was like, 25 minutes. He's like, oh, okay. Come on down. So I
Now,
came down, and
was the pay decent and benefits and all that? Could you support a family on that?
no, it started at like 59,000,
Yeah, in
which,
California, that doesn't get you anywhere.
I was shocked, but they ended up raising it substantially, but they had been rolling on the fact that they are hiring mostly retired LAPD cops
Hmm.
who did the drop program, and
Oh, yeah, sure.
so their pension's already 150,000, and now they're just tacking on another 59, and they're like, "Hey, I'm good, and this job is easy for
Ah,
me." So that started to run out though. So they did raise, I think they raised it up to 70 or 80. So when I was there, I was making 60, living in LA proper, living in Los Feliz, which is like a nice neighborhood,
ooh.
two bedroom apartment for like 2,200 a month. So what I
I
did,
bet it isn't 2,200 a month now.
no, it's probably crazy. Um, so what I did was I actually met a guy named Ron Phillips, who was a supervising D3 detective for the O.J. Simpson trial. He was like the
Oh,
desk
okay.
desk next to me.
Yeah.
He got to know me, and he said, hey, a couple of my buddies own a security company. They're active coppers that employ cops to do security. I understand you probably need some extra money. I'm like, oh yeah. So he's like, all right, here's their phone number, email. I already put a word in for you. You'll get the job.
Sweet.
So yeah, he said one of their main accounts was Harry Winston in Beverly Hills.
Okay.
So you just a black suit, black tie, white shirt, um, pistol, and that's it. And they give you an earpiece, and you just stand on the floor. I mean, I guess the place next to Harry Winston a few years before I'd been there had takeover robbery.
Oh God.
where a hostage got killed.
Oh
And
boy.
Harry Winston looked at it and said, well, we have like almost $1 billion of jewels. And that store was like a clothing store. So they had their own security, but they decided like we need like three guys on the floor because if
Sure.
a takeover robbery comes in, we want three guns on these guys right
Yeah.
away.
Makes sense.
So it's a job where you do absolutely nothing and you hear the most obnoxious, privileged conversations you've ever heard in your entire life. And you just want to put your gun in your mouth and blow your brains out when like someone buys a tennis bracelet for like 1.9 million. You're like, why don't you, donate some money to the community center? Jeez. Um, but anyways, yeah. So that job kind of helped get me through with extra money and
Yeah.
kind of make it.
So from there, where did you go?
From that point, I did backgrounds for 2 years, and I was really sick of working the the extra work. It was like, oh
Okay.
my gosh, it's like I'm a cop again. I'm like, I'm working, and then I'm working extra. I'm like, this
Right.
is this is crazy. So my buddy manages nationally, he's a SIU manager for Mafre Insurance, and they do the Special Investigative Unit, is what it's called, for insurance fraud.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd always seen him on Facebook, like posting about his job in different places. And I wrote him a message like, hey man, your job looks sweet. What's that all about? I went to college with him. And he's
Okay.
like, we don't have any openings, but if we do, I'll let you know. And then I saw there was an opening. He let me know, and I ended up working for him. And this job was like, I could live off the pay. I got a take home car. I got a laptop. They paid for the internet to my house. I booked my own travel. My
Nice.
territory was from Fresno to the Mexican border. And you made your own schedule. That popped up, I think, because my iPhone is reading my fingers. I'll shut that off. Um, yeah. So, oh, did I freeze myself, buddy?
Yeah, you did.
Uh, that was dumb. Hmm. I don't know why I did that.
So I'm gonna pause us. There you go.
So yeah, I was investigating insurance fraud all over SoCal, and what happened was we had been there 4 years in California, and we had another child, a son, our only Californian, and it just became apparent to us, like every time we'd see our parents, the time periods were long,
Yeah.
and they were getting older every time we saw them, and I was feeling like this wanderlust was coming to an end. We both were, and we're like, we
Mm.
kind of feel like we've done something bad, keep bringing our children so far away from our family
Okay.
in a way. So we ended up, I picked up the phone in Mass. I found an ad for a cop job in Western Massachusetts. It's a small town, and the chief there actually, I went to college with him as well. So
Oh wow, small
we had,
world.
we had mutual friends, and he's like, brother, we can't hire cops right now. He's like, had this opening for a while, so if you're in, just let me know. I'll get you an interview. We can do a video interview with the select board members, and um, pending your background, you're great. So let's do it. So, and we want to go to Western Mass because you can own land in Western Mass. Like we got 4 acres and a little house out here,
Oh, nice. Okay.
and you can have we have like dairy goats and we have some chickens, and we're pretty remote. The town we live in, not the town I police in, but the town we live in, there's like 1,200 people, but it's like the town is like 60 square miles. So,
Wow.
um, I love it. I mean, it's so
Yeah.
great. So I decided let's move back. We came back, and Massachusetts gives you a 5 year window before your academy expires. Every year you're
Ah.
out, you have to
Okay.
jump through another hoop. So if you're out 1 year, it's like firearms and first responder. If you're out 2 years, it's those two and another one. And if you're out 4 years like I was, I had to come back to Massachusetts and make up 160 hours of in-service training hours.
Oh, that's horrible.
And that was terrible. And it was during the pandemic, so they're like, you can do it online. So I sat down at a computer for 160 hours
Oh.
and learned updates to juvenile laws and marijuana and custody and
Oh.
domestics and motor vehicle and handheld, all these laws. I was like, oh my gosh. And just my luck, the juvenile law had been rewritten in like the second year I left. completely different than I remember. What you can actually do to a juvenile, how you can handle them, who you have to call. I mean, everything had changed.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so I got through all that. I got sworn in. Mass became a post state from police reform, and so now we actually have post commissions to be an officer. And there was a moment in time when they're like, your gap might have been too big. You might have to
Ooh.
go back through police academy. And I was like,
Oh, that'd be no bueno.
ain't happened. So it turns out I was fine.
Okay.
They honored the old laws before they put new ones in. So, and here
Nice.
here I am in Western Mass, living on living on a nice piece of land with 3 kids, wife, and yeah, loving life,
Okay.
man. Doing the podcast.
Cool. So how big of a department are you in? Like how many members?
Right now, I'm proud to say we just got approved for our 4th full-time officer. So we'll
Oh,
be,
okay. So it's a smaller town. Okay.
yeah, 4 full-time, and then we have like 4 or 5 reserve officers who supplement shifts.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, we do 2 towns. Um, the kind of combined police departments because they were so small. It's about, I think, a total of maybe 60 square miles with like 3,000 residents. It's pretty
Okay.
small.
All right.
Yeah.
Very good. Now, why be a cop? What was I mean, obviously, your dad, it's a steady paycheck and all that. Is that why you kind of went into it, or was there any other reasons?
I thought about this a lot because I don't like the answer. It's not a bad answer, but I don't like the answer to help people because
Right.
it's
Because
part and
everybody
parcel
says
to
that.
the job. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, yeah. For me, it really was when I really thought about it, I was thinking to myself, what did I see at that young age that I thought was so cool and that stuck with me and didn't change as I got older and still had interest in the job. And I think when I really look at it, it's a profession that's very needed. It's ancient, it's very old, well established, and you can attain this job that, in my eyes, requires uh, bravery, um, intelligence, and good instinct with blue collar qualifications. So for if you get what I'm saying, like it's the kind of job to me that was always like, wow, you can attain this job that like they make all these movies about.
Right.
People are always interested in.
Yep.
People love this job, and you get to put yourself in a position to really test your mettle and be like, can I be the guy that, pulls a kid out of a burning car or
Mhm.
goes into the domestic alone when backup's not there yet and someone's being beat up? Like, you know what I mean? Like that the
Oh yeah.
opportunity to have this position in the community and having seen my father do it and seeing how people respected my father and thanked him, and also all the inside knowledge he had about the community. Like I'd go to do a dump run with him when I was a kid, and he would be like, "Oh, this guy, stay away from him," or "This guy's that guy's a dirtbag." Like he seemed to know everything about our community,
Sure.
and people would randomly come up to him and thank him for little things, and he would never elaborate on what that thing was. He would just be like, "Oh, she just needed some help," or he was having a bad day, or whatever.
Yeah.
He was pretty humble about it, and to me, it was like, wow, this is like a pretty badass job that you can attain being a pretty normal person. You know what I mean? There's no
Yeah.
this isn't like joining SEAL Team 6 or something or being a superhero. You know what I mean? Like it's like you
Right.
just get to be a normal dude in the community and do some cool stuff and have access to cool training and cool weapons. I always loved guns. I
Mhm.
that's not a real popular answer to why want to be a cop. It's not the main answer, but as a little boy, as a man,
Oh, sure.
I always looked at this stuff like the badge, the gun, like these are the tools of the righteous, and these are the guys that they don't use these things for bad, but for good. Like these are things the great equalizer a cop can use to, you know, stop the evil in the community. That's how my like young mind was thinking. Like this is cool that you can do this job and it's available and every town or city has it. To me, that was cool. And of course, you do get a high from helping people because that you learn that when you get the job, it's like there's a lot of little mundane stuff you're going to do that you'll walk away from and go, that felt pretty good. Like I helped problem solve in that situation. I helped figure out a problem for this person. I mean, I sat at a woman's house one night for hours ordering her an oil truck in February because it was like 17 degrees out. She had
Oh,
no family to take care of her. She was,
aw.
going to be on hospice soon
Oh,
and refused to leave her
God.
house. So
Oh,
she called the
Lord.
police department and said, she couldn't even get up to get the phone. I'm like, this is not safe. That it
Yeah.
took her an hour to get the phone. I'm
Oh,
like, so I moved the phone near her where she was on her bed, contacted her neighbor, and then I sat there. I took her debit card, kind of
yeah.
put myself out there a little bit. I took her debit card with her next to me and said, "This is cool with you?" Yes, I have plenty of money. Called, explained it to the oil company. They agreed to send an emergency call out, woke somebody up to bring the oil truck, got her fuel, and she got heat for her house. Is that an exciting or fun story? Not really. It was quite aggravating for me, but when I was done, I'm like, man, this old lady would have froze to death.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Just little things like that pop up that you see like the real spectrum of the job where it's like it's not running and gunning all the time. It's like you're really there for you're a lot of ways, especially where I work now, you're a catch-all. Like you're like,
Oh,
we don't
right.
know who else to call. Help
E-
us.
Even in big cities, that happens. Like I work in, you could say it's a big city, 600,000 people. And our one call, it was a busy, busy. I was working day shift, which at first I absolutely hated, and I grew to enjoy it. But I
Right.
worked nights for 17 years, and that was all the fun stuff. Now it's like I'm dealing with real citizens. Before I really wasn't, unless they were a victim of something. And we got a call for check the welfare, and it was so busy. It was me and another sergeant. All the cops were busy. It's like, okay. So we go to this gentleman's house. He was blind, very elderly, and we're like, what can we do for you, sir? And he's like, I'm lonely. And we just
Boy,
stared at each other like, huh?
be my friend.
Yeah. And he started crying.
Oh no.
And we're like, oh shit. What now? But we stayed with him for about an hour. Just telling stories and whatever, and
Yeah.
we brightened up his day. Now, you're not always able to do anything like that, and and we were able to contact some like social service people. It's like, hey, this guy needs some looking after.
Need some
you know
interaction. Yeah.
right, he wasn't so bad that we would like chapter 51 him, which is like you're unable to take care of yourself. He could take care of
Right.
himself. I mean, he wasn't like dirty, or the house didn't smell bad. There was, I mean, but it was just one of those moments. It came out of left field, and you're like, wow, this is crazy. And like you said,
Yeah.
it's not a car chase going 100 miles an hour down city streets, with a bank robber, a homicide suspect, or stuff that we've all done. But it's just sometimes, it's just that human interaction, and there's no other job where you could do that.
Right. Yeah. You're very much your own boss. I mean,
Oh,
even as a patrolman when I was younger and a patrol guy, it's like you get in your car, we didn't have partners. You had your duty bag next to you. And, yeah, the sergeant would come by if you had to stop. It seemed like something or a call, he would back you or whatever. But it was very much like your discretion, your office is the car, and you just
yeah.
kind of go. You can get into all kinds of stuff. To me, like that. I remember the graduating police academy and being done with training and being in my patrol car alone and being like, yes, here I go. I'm alone.
So let's talk about your wildly popular Things Policey podcast. When and why did you start that?
That it kind of birthed in LAPD backgrounds. So, like I mentioned briefly before, I just worked with a bunch of legends at this. Like, a
Okay.
lot of these guys were retired LAPD or from surrounding cities. And in LA, I mean, I think maybe not everybody knows, but like the cities that orbit LA are like 2 to 400,000 people. Like
Right. Yep.
there's no small towns at all. So all these guys I mean, a lot of them have been in 5 or 6 shootouts. A lot of them have been
Wow.
shot. I mean, just like crazy stuff. So I would sit at lunch with them and they would start telling these stories just from the job, that just off the cuff, just, oh, that reminds me of this one time. And the stories were frigging nuts. Like just, especially the ones from like the 70s. We're
Oh,
like,
I
yeah, we're
bet.
just driving, shooting out the window, like crazy stuff. But then just crazy like um uh stories about people being, in kidnapped or put in trunks or horribly mutilated, just like crazy lunchtime stories. And you're eating your sandwich and you're like, oh my gosh. But it was also at a time where the anti-police thing was ramping up more and more
Mm.
and more. And I kept thinking to myself, and I've always kind of had like a creative bend to me. I've always wanted, like um I did stand-up comedy for 5 years
Oh,
when I
wow.
was
Okay.
on the Cape. I ended up performing in Boston, and I got to open for like Lenny Clark and Steve Sweeney, some big local guys.
Yeah.
Like Lenny Clark was Uncle Teddy on Rescue Me, I think.
Oh, yeah, I
But
love that guy. Yeah, he's
yeah,
hilarious.
nicest guy in the world too, the nicest guy. So I did that for 5 years, and because I've always had this creative outlet, and it's hard to find when you're a cop. It's you're kind of in the zone as being a cop. It's kind of hard to like. I guess you could do it if you got in doing presentations for the community or something. But
Yeah.
anyways, yeah, I'm sitting there listening to these stories, and I'm thinking I listen to I consume a ton of podcasts, and I always thought they were so cool. I'm like, how cool is this? I can just search a subject. Some guy in his basement in, wherever, Detroit, has a podcast he started because he's a pipe fitter and his buddies are pipe fitters, and they're just talking about pipe fitting and their schedules and what the work is like. And it's like, who would have thought this would be interesting? But this guy essentially started his own radio station for like nothing, and he put it out to Apple iTunes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I always thought that was incredible. And I'm like, man, I want to have a podcast, but I don't want to like have it just be, um, you know, uh, hey, I think me and my buddies are funny. We'll just sit around, drink beer, and crack wise, and everybody will love it. Like, no, I've heard those podcasts. They don't work because
Right.
you're nobody knows the inside jokes, and you're not famous, so no one really cares what you think. So,
Sure.
um, I naturally just kind of, at the same time having those thoughts, listen to these guys tell their stories. I'm like, man, how beneficial would it be if people could be a fly in the wall in this room and actually hear with
Mm.
like no editing, like just exactly how they're telling me the stories,
Yeah.
not cleaning it up, not making it PC, just what these men and women are dealing with on a daily basis in these, especially these big cities where they're being spat on and
Yeah.
disregarded. So that's how I started it. And I was wondering, like, man, I wonder if these guys would be open to that, because a lot of them are. I mean, they're great dudes, do anything for you, but they were, some real grisly stuff in their past, and I wasn't sure they'd even want to talk about it. Like
Right.
I'm not sure this is going to fly. So I kind of floated it to Rob McCreary, who is on the desk next to me. Great guy. He actually he was a Pomona canine cop, heavily awarded for his service. Had been in 5, I think, shootouts.
God.
Pomona's a rough and tumble city,
Yeah.
and despite the Beach Boys song or whatever it is, it's not like that anymore.
Okay.
Um, and he'd actually been a BMX star when he was a teenager, like on the front cover of the magazines.
Oh,
And
cool. Okay.
he had a really cool story. And I asked him about it, and he was like, and he had some PTSD from working.
Sure.
Um, and he said, yeah, I'll do it. So I went over to his house, a little portable recorder,
Yeah.
and we sat in his house, and he just started telling stories, and they were unreal. And one of his stories was the time an African lion broke out of a transport going through Pomona,
Oh, God.
and when it was running down one of the sketchy streets in Pomona, weaving in between pimps and prostitutes.
Oh,
And
my
people are
Lord.
like, like an African lion. No, so his stories right away gave me hope. I'm like, these are nuts. I can't believe that's real. I got to keep doing this. So I just
Absolutely.
kept mining that well at
Okay.
backgrounds, and they came, and it took probably a year. I mean, I was getting, if I got 20 or 30 downloads on a podcast episode, I was like, Scott, I was so happy. I'm like, oh, 30 people listen to this. This is great. But after a year, that wears off, and you're like,
Right.
35 people. Oh my gosh. This
Oh,
is like,
boy.
these stories are gold. How come this isn't working for me?
Yeah.
And no credit to me. It's all to the people that come on. Like, I want people to hear these stories.
Yes.
So I took a break for like 8 months. I was just exhausted. You know how it is.
Oh,
People who
yeah.
don't podcast wouldn't know, but like, it's a grind,
It really
scheduling
is.
people, editing, getting the word out. So I took a little break. In that 8 months, I went back and checked on the podcast. I kept it open. I kept the Libsyn account, and all
Yeah.
that. Never looked at it. I looked at it like in 8 months or maybe even a year's time, and had been getting like 150 to 200 downloads a day.
Cool.
And I'm like, where did that come? There's just a little, the little graph was like boop,
Yeah.
and then just stayed up. I'm like, oh, people are finding it. People are finding it and listening. And then I'm starting to get emails. Hey, what the hell? I've listened to these 25 episodes twice, and why wouldn't you publish more? This podcast is great. So that gave me a kick in the ass that I needed to be like, all
Sweet.
right, don't be a little bitch. Let's start
Just
recording again.
that's awesome. Good for you.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear that kind of stuff. Now, like I said, it's very popular, and we keep your like where you work as anonymous, because you're still a working cop,
right.
right? Yeah. How much time you got left before you retire?
I have at this point I have like 17 years in the retirement system.
Okay.
So if I want to get 80%, which would be 32 years, and I'd have to be 55, which I will be just over 55. I'd have to go another whatever that number is, 32 minus 17. I can't do it in my head.
Yeah.
To reveal how dumb cops are right here.
Exactly. Two cops trying to do math. That's not going to work. So a while.
16 years, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think.
all right. So you're going to stay on the job for a while. Let's just say that.
Yeah, and where I work now, there is opportunity to. I work for a great department. My chief is great. He's my age. We went to the same college. He's like
Wow.
very cool. He promoted me to sergeant, and he's like, because
Nice.
there was a sergeant spot to kind of help him, because it's like it is insane running a police department this small. It is. I mean, the amount of stuff that he has to do, and then now I do as a sergeant is like more like patrol slash like admin lieutenant stuff. Like it's like reporting to state agencies and report requests and approving reports and liaison between the courts for arrests. It's like it's really weird, but it's fun. It's like 'cause you get to do everything,
Sure.
like everything under the sun. So I'm going to stay here for the foreseeable future. But there are, I mean, a lot of these towns, it's tempting. There are towns that have even smaller police departments that are like 2 guys, 3 guys.
Yeah.
And I am qualified to be a chief in one of those towns.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So do I want to do that? Like, I don't know. Cause I mean, once you become a chief, you are kind of on the hook 24 hours for these towns. Cause they
Yes, you
like,
are.
I mean, the state patrol takes over at midnight, but if there's a body or fatal crash or something like that, you got to go out.
Absolutely.
And I'm kind of in that spot now, is in my position now, but I kind of share it with him. If you go to a small place where you're I see, my mind goes to the romantic side where I'm wearing Wranglers and a cowboy hat and like a outer vest, kind of like Sheriff Lamb. I'm like, I'm dressed like that. I have a star, and I'm at the office with my feet up, and I'm the big head honcho. But in reality, you would be like a full-time patrolman slash chief slash dog
Yeah,
catcher.
you do
Everything.
everything.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. Now, do you ever get pushback from like bosses or other cops regarding your podcast?
Not really. I do get pushback. I'm Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ as a savior that died for us and rose again and ascended into heaven. So that belief system, which I believe to be true, has certain things in it which I don't waver on.
Mm-hmm.
That conflict with my job seems to get me closer to being in hot water than doing the podcast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like it's because on the podcast I'll express those opinions, and there's no, I think there's no parsing out someone's beliefs nowadays. It's either you're evil
Yeah,
or you're
exactly.
not.
You're right.
So it's not like you can't make a comment on gay marriage or abortion or something, and you can't be nuanced about it and say, hey, I love these people. I would never treat them differently, and they were made in the image of God and deserve all the love and compassion that anybody else does. But I believe there's some error, some sin in what's going on here. That is heard as you're a bigot, and there's no way you could be a police officer and enforce the laws without being biased. I've gotten messages like that, like, well, how could you possibly even deal with a person that doesn't? I'm like, well, that's part of the Christian credo, is to love everybody. So it's,
Well, and the thing about that is, it's like working in a big city. I've worked with, like, one of my partners was, a born again Christian.
yep.
And then I had another partner that was an atheist. Then I've had another partner that's Catholic, like me. I've had just the full spectrum. I worked with a communist. This guy was
Right.
a full card carrying communist. He just
Yeah.
thought that was the best thing ever. And I'm like, yeah, how'd that work out in those countries then? Yeah, the
Right.
USSR and Venezuela. Yeah, I won't get into that. But when it comes time to do the job, you do the job. It's
Right.
that simple.
Yeah.
Everybody is different. It's obvious, but maybe not obvious in the world we live in now. Everybody has their own beliefs. Everybody, whatever, unless it's something like crazy where, it's like, yeah, I'm a Nazi. Okay, that might be a problem,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's the thought police. Like they don't want to believe that I can, if I'm, and I've got very few complaints in my career and generally seen as a, approachable, nice guy, like I'm just a pretty normal guy. But it's the thought police where we don't care how you act outwardly. We're cared that you might have those thoughts in your head. It's like, well,
yeah, see,
you don't control the thoughts in my head because there's a lot of Muslim cops out there that
right.
don't get questioned at all. And if you read the Quran, it's a little harsher than Christianity. You know what I mean? Like it's,
Well, that strikes a memory because in our detective bureau, we had a Palestinian sharing a desk with a Jew.
oh,
They
wow.
were right next to each other. So of course, cops being cops, you gotta give them shit.
Right.
That's just the way it is. But again, at the end of the day, we all did our jobs.
Right. That's all
You
you got
know,
to do.
you got to put all that aside, and it's like, okay, we're just gonna do our jobs. I can believe what I can believe. That's cool. And if you want to do whatever, awesome. As long as you got my back when the
Right.
fur is flying and you dispense the law in a fair, just way, then there shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a buddy of mine said it well years ago when my dad used to have big chili parties and stuff, have a bunch of people from town, and politics would come up, Democrat, Republican stuff, religion or whatever. But it was always a Coke and Pepsi thing. It was kind of like, whatever, you're a knucklehead. You know what I mean? It was never
Yeah.
like, let me now call your employer and let them know about your dangerous right wing thoughts. You know what I mean? Like that wasn't a thing, and now it is. Like people are
Well,
like, hey, how about I advise your employer that? Blah, 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 blah.
yeah, I
So
wish people could take a couple of steps backwards and look at the big picture. I was talking to a good buddy of mine about Saturday Night Live. It's like, okay, for years and years, they always made fun of whoever the president was.
right,
That was just fair game. But it
yeah,
was
that's like
always
one of
a
their
kind of
staples.
it was kind of like a lighthearted thing. George Bush, Junior or senior, Dana Carvey could do a great impersonation of him. And there wasn't venom in it. There wasn't like hate.
Right,
Gerald Ford, Chevy Chase did an awesome Gerald Ford. He's
yeah,
always falling down, just doing
yeah,
goofy stuff.
falling off the
And
jetway.
right, but then, like in 2016, it's like, we hate this Trump guy so much. Now it's like there's so much venom and hate. And it's like, damn, it doesn't, I don't know. But that could be a whole other show, I guess.
Yeah,
But
it's just not fun anymore, Patrick.
yeah, I don't think it's funny. I don't think it's even
Yeah,
close to funny. We've lost our sense of humor, which is very unfortunate. But I think that it's a pendulum and it goes back and forth.
yeah,
Hopefully it's swinging back the right way.
I hope
But
so, my man.
anyways, what are some of the unexpected benefits of your podcast?
Um, just meeting people. I mean,
Yeah,
I've not gone almost anywhere, and I have like police contacts all over the country,
all over the
and
world, probably.
all over the world,
Yeah.
Germany and Ireland and England and Australia.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I can write an email, and just because we shared this common thing, um, we're buddies. Like if Patrick O'Donnell shot me an email and said, "Hey, I'm in Mass and my car broke down, or this, that, or we need a place to crash for the night," I'd be like, come on over, brother. You know what I mean? Like that would be a thing. And I'm sure you do the same thing for me. Like it's created this like wider network of guys and we all kind of help each other out. And those relationships to me are really cool.
Yeah, where else could you become friends with somebody that, is kind of like a pseudo celebrity or even a celebrity? You're just like, I'm just who am I? I'm nobody. I'm just this dude in Wisconsin. And all of a sudden, you're
Right.
talking to somebody that, I was talking to Jack Haar for God's sakes, and I'm just
That's
like,
great.
that's so awesome. I just, yeah,
Yeah.
I can't say enough, and I can't say enough good things about him. He is one of the most genuine, nicest guys like ever. But
That's
anyways,
awesome.
so war stories. People are fascinated with them. Why? Why do people love war stories so much? It's like you go to a party, even like family, and it's like, oh, tell me a story. Tell me a story.
Yep. I think most people's lives are pretty insular and are pretty safe and something to be grateful for in this country.
Yes.
Most people don't experience um what we're going to experience. And even on a small town scale, the PD is still kind of like this clandestine organization. Like they don't know
Yeah.
what's going on in the booking room, or like, oh, why you running those plates, or maybe somebody's on the task force and you're watching the house. Like to them, that stuff is like from the movies. They're like, wow,
Right.
this this is crazy. I think that's what it is. I think hearing when you open the floodgates and let out a story, and a lot of times you probably have your wife elbowing you, like too much detail,
Yeah.
there's kids here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's been there,
Then his
done
head
that.
came off and rolled down the
Yeah.
pavement. Um,
So that's what guts look like. Okay.
right. Yeah, I think that's where the interest comes from, just the hearing the real life stories that they've only seen in movies, but hearing it from someone they know. And
Right.
I think in a way, cops are kind of like little local celebrities. When someone sees you off
Yeah.
duty, they're kind of like, hey, it's
Yeah.
Officer Steve or whatever the kids call me, and it's like this big thing. I've been invited to birthday parties and all kinds of stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good for you. So, what were some of your favorite stories from the guests? Because how many episodes are you in now? Like, how many interviews have you done?
199 publishes Wednesday.
Wow. And probably, do you do any like bonus content?
Yeah, I started the Patreon last year because I wanted to get support, an easier way to be supported by the people that really love the show without like getting too many sponsors on
Yeah.
or ads. I still do the ad inserts, but if you do the Patreon, you get the show with no ads, you get it early, and you get the cops in the news live broadcasts. You get the
Mm,
replay for that. So
okay.
nobody else gets it. If you join live, you get to see it, but otherwise, you won't be able to get to see cops in the news. And it's helped. I got, between that and the ad inserts, it pays like for like 2/3 of my mortgage. So
Nice.
um, it's not nothing. I'll take it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right. So, what are some of your favorite stories from your guests?
Brother, I saw this question. I was like, oh my, I started looking through the episodes and I'm like,
There's so many.
so I just scrolled through real quick and just jotted some down. I had Ralph Friedman on, who's like one of the most highly decorated NYPD detectives in history.
Yeah.
Um, his stories they're just insane. I mean, he had one um about a girl being held hostage in an apartment, and the guy had a butcher knife, like a big butcher knife,
Yeah.
and he had her arm, and he was holding the cops off with that. And then they were trying to figure out what they're going to do, and the guy cut her arm off. It's like a 5-year-old girl.
Ugh.
And she died. And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And then he had this other one. I don't even, I mean, it feels inappropriate even saying the story. I can give you the synopsis. I mean, it's just a pretty PG podcast usually.
You can say whatever you want. I don't care.
Okay. It seems like usually people keep it pretty civil here. Um, the this woman, this guy's wife in Brooklyn got kidnapped by like a local gangster type and brought to a basement. And I'll just put it this way. She was tied to a bed
Ugh.
and there was a line of 50 people,
Oh, my Lord.
pantsless people in the basement.
Yeah.
And it had been going on for hours.
Oh, that poor woman. Oh,
Oh, it was awful. And it's just he was telling the story and I'm like, I don't want this in my mind, but now I'm doing it to your listeners, so I'm sorry.
right.
But him and his boys went in there with shotguns and he said that he just started clipping people in the face. Boom. He's like, as far as we concerned, everybody there was guilty. Just
Sure.
bang, bang, just banging guys and knocking them out with their butts of their shotguns. And I mean, it was so bad. They said the ambulance driver took her to a nearby house that had a hose and
Oh,
they wouldn't let her get in until they used it on her.
Ah,
I mean, stuff like that, that is just like so horrific and unbelievable. It's like people are capable of this type of stuff. Like this is, I mean, when people say they don't need the police, it's like, please, you have no
yeah.
idea what's going on in
You
these
don't need the
places.
police until you need the police.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I had Jay Moberly, 40 years he did robbery homicide, LAPD, one of my early interviews, good friend of mine, just the best dude. Like everybody in LAPD seemed to know him. He was like a legend. He was a K9 officer at one point before he was robbery homicide. He solved a quadruple homicide that had to do with binding people and setting them on fire, um, which was totally nuts. Joe Kenda, of course, the great Joe Kenda came on.
Yes.
Um, this guy has amassed investigations and stories out of Colorado Springs that are like unreal, and his storytelling is just bar none. He's like the best storyteller. His voice, his inflections,
Yes.
he comes up with these little quips, these little sayings that he lives by, and they're all friggin' fantastic. You know, it's
Yep.
like mining gold when he comes on. He was unbelievable. Pierre Charette is a recent one I did. He started in Florida, became DEA undercover. He was part a big part of breaking up the French connection, the dope connection from
Oh, cool.
France to the
Okay.
US.
Yeah.
Came back, he started getting following the money to Pablo Escobar,
Oh.
started tracing the money and started seeing that there may be some U.S. state senators involved, along
Mm.
with the attorney general um, from North Carolina. And he started following the breadcrumbs, and he got called by one of his buddies who's a state senator and said there was just a closed door meeting at this famous old bar. Um, and you need to stop what you're doing because they're going to kill you. They straight up
Wow.
said they're going to kill you.
Dang.
And yeah, so I that was my big line. It's like, so you were safer overseas, deep cover as a Canadian mob boss than with U.S. state senators. He's like, yeah, they were going to kill me, and the U.S. attorney was in on it. So that was nuts. James Morris tells a story about fighting for his life, getting choked out on the front lawn, nobody helping him. He's a combat vet, super tough guy, tough cop, and because of the guy's ethnicity, he was holding back with using deadly force because he
Mm.
knew how it would look, which to me was like just crazy, just being choked out, like losing consciousness almost, and like
Wow.
holding back and doing what he had to do. Also, he caught, believe it or not, one thread that runs through, not a lot, but pops up more often than I would like, is catching people in the act of bestiality.
Oh
Uh,
God.
this is a thing, I guess, for maybe more. I want to say the stories all came from the Midwest or the South. I'm not saying that means anything, but that's
Well, in
that's the good.
25 years, I only had one. And I was just like, ew, that's just not okay at all. I'm like, oh
You're
God,
bad.
that's
That's
just
a bad thing.
yes, that's
Um,
disgusting.
then JB King came on. He was a sheriff. He caught an MP. He had a bunch of great stories, but he caught an MP on a base where when kids would travel through, he would pull them over and kill them.
What?
Yeah, they had like an old like government owned cottage by a lake or something,
Oh my
and
Lord.
one of his victims escaped, and they found her in a bush. So he's on the base investigating with the MPs, and she said he gave me the car number of the cruiser, the
Yeah,
MP's cruiser. So they're sitting there. He's talking to the commander. What car pulls up?
that
That car
car.
number. That
Oh
car
my
number
God.
to the investigation. So there had been, I think he killed 3 people that night. One girl escaped. There had been in the past people gone missing on the base that they never solved
Wow.
on this road. So that was like what? And then that story goes on from there.
Right.
Then Cloyd Steiger, Seattle homicide investigator, as perverse and wild as you would think homicides would be in Seattle. I mean, just
I can only
friggin'
imagine.
just a nightmare of immoral, godless heathens just tearing each other apart.
Oh Lord.
So there, I mean, that's a few of them.
Yeah,
There's so many. I have to say, I do like light vetting when someone wants to be on the show. I'll Google them.
sure.
I send the guest letter so they know what I'm looking for. And there's only like out of almost 200, there maybe was like 1 or 2 duds that didn't work out. That, I mean, that to
Wow.
me, that's incredible odds for
Yeah,
not really going deep. Like I don't contact people's references. You know what I mean? I just go,
sure, sure.
hey, you're a cop. Where'd you work? Cops know I can find out their information. And the stories all check out. They're all
Wow,
true and totally wild.
crazy. So let's turn the microphone on Steve. Yeah, he's always the one asking the questions. This podcast today is I'm turning the microphone on him.
All
He
right.
asks for dramatic, funny, and heartwarming stories. And I love the fact that you asked for a heartwarming one because it can't all be doom and gloom. It's
Right.
a feel good one. I think that's really good. So your first question to me when you were interviewing me was, what was your first hot call for you?
All right. I wrote down some calls.
Okay,
One of them I wanted to talk about is actually still in the court, so I couldn't talk about, but it was one of the
sure.
more crazy ones. But I'm just trying to, preface it by saying I do have some other ones. So when I was a young NRO, natural resource officer, one of the first big things I went to, and I was like 22 years old, was a plane crash.
Oh, wow.
And like being that young, I never even imagine, you hear the radio go off and you're like, how would I respond to that call? What would I do? You know what I mean? Like
Right.
you kind
Oh,
of like,
absolutely.
what would the law be? What could I do? Could I threaten arrest or is that not arrestable? You know what I mean? When you're
Yep.
young, you're trying to figure it out. So it comes over, we're down at the landing down by a bridge that a highway goes over, going down to the boat. And this guy zooms in his skiff and he's like, a plane just went down at the mouth of the river. The river goes out to Nantucket Sound. And we're like, what? He's like,
Like,
a
what am I supposed to do about
commercial, yeah,
that?
it's like a commercial plane just crashed.
Holy cow.
Like, where? Like out in the ocean? He's like, right offshore. And I look at the other guy, and he had been a coastie and he'd been on the job for like 10 years. So
Okay.
I was like, my heart was like, boop, 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 boop.
Oh,
I was like,
sure.
what is this feeling? I'm feeling like I am jacked up, ready to go. So I take the helm, lights and sirens on the patrol boat, and we're zooming down Bass River, going through obviously all the slow no way, all that stuff we usually putt through. We are
Okay.
flying, going around boats, and we get out there and we're getting radio traffic that Colgan Airlines had a malfunction. They left Hyannisport and something to do with their one of their flaps
Okay.
stuck. So these guys were trying to turn around and
Mm.
go back to the airport, but the plane was just getting sucked towards
Oh,
the water. They couldn't do anything. And there was actually a kayaker out there floating there. And she believed, she's like, I saw them. I could see them when they were like, I could see their faces when they were a couple hundred feet
oh,
up. And she
wow.
goes, I swear they pulled hard right not to hit me.
Dang.
Because when we saw each other, they pulled, and
Yeah.
it was like a 30 passenger jet, so it's not a big plane, but
Yeah, but
it's not a
still.
Cessna either. It's
Right,
a
right.
commercial plane. And it hit the water, and after the nose went in like 4 feet, it hit a boulder that was like 10
Oh,
feet tall,
damn the luck.
and yeah, it just eviscerated these guys. Just
Oh, yeah.
I think their torsos were left strapped in, um, but their legs and lower half were
Uh,
floating. It just I'll never forget when I pulled up and I saw the kayaker, talked with them, and then I look and there's just you can't see anything because the ground is all disturbed. Even though it's only like 12 feet of water, it's all disturbed, and there's just a streak of fuel, like
sure.
in magazines floating, things you would imagine,
Oh,
peanuts, whatever, just
yeah.
floating there. And I'm like, at this point, I really truly don't know what to do because this was never in any training I went to. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm like, dude, do we jump in the water? And of course, the guy I'm with is like, this is like, a blender of metal down there.
Yeah,
Obviously,
right.
no one's gonna be helped by us trying to go in the water.
Yeah.
So turns out these two guys obviously they didn't make it. There was no passengers on board, just a pilot and co-pilot.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that was the first one that I had that was like the first emergency I responded to and it was very much emergency where you get there and your heart rate's like 175, you're ready for action, and then it's just kind of like set up perimeters, contact the Coast Guard, like you're
Right.
just kind of doing containment at this point.
Yeah.
And the FAA comes in and um or yeah, FFA. Is that what it is? Federal Flight Administration? FFA.
FAA?
FAA? Yeah, one
FAA.
of those
Federal
acronyms.
Aviation Administration. Yeah,
Yeah.
FAA.
They sent their agents down and
Okay.
our boat stayed behind, and the the torsos were brought to the dock, and then any other pieces over the next few days were brought out to a Coast Guard cutter
Uh,
that was offshore.
okay.
But Yeah, that was the first time I really went to a major thing where I was like,
Wow.
wow.
Yeah, that's a
And
biggie.
that adrenaline dump, you know what I mean? Like
Oh yes,
two
yes.
people arguing or like having to like mix it up with some drunk dude is kind of like, you get a little jazzed, but it's like I've wrestled people, I've fought people in my life. Like this is, but I've never been to an airplane that exploded. And
No,
you know
that's
what I mean?
yes. Wow.
So that was nuts.
Okay, stranger bizarre call.
Um, I wrote down a couple for these. One of them is very dark, but I thought was bizarre. And one is more fun. The more fun one was I pulled a guy over. He's reports of a car all over the road in the highway. I pull him over and he's got wine stained teeth and lips, that purple,
Yeah.
like someone who's been drinking too much red wine, just stained. He's got some wine on his white shirt. He has a weird, like blousy button up shirt. You know what I mean? So, and he's
Yeah.
got a beard. He's short and fat, kind of like trolley looking dude. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, I stopped you. And he's like, oh man, I'm just lost. I was in Chatham. And I'm like, that's like 2 towns from here and like probably, 25 minutes of driving. So you're way lost. You're
Yeah.
going towards the tip of the Cape. You're trying to get out of here. Well, it turns out he does field sobriety bombs. Tells me he's been drinking. I was drinking wine, and I started talking to him once he's all packaged up, and I'm like, "Were you at a party?" Or he's like, "Well, I'm I'm on a cuck for hire website
Oh, what for
where
hire?
cuck like cuckold, like people hire him to have sex with their wives."
Oh my God.
And I'm like, same as you at that time. I didn't. I'm like cuck. He's a cuckold. Like I have sex with people's wives in front of him. I'm looking at this guy that looks like a troll, and I'm like,
He's a garden gnome.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So this is a weird fetish, but I'm like, well, what happened? He's like, well, I showed up to the house, and I think they just looked at me, and I wasn't exactly how my profile picture looked. I'm like, yeah. Keep talking because this is making sense. And he's like, yeah, so I think they just felt bad because I brought a bunch of wine and they were like, why don't you stay with us and have the wine and then hit the road? So I was nervous and felt bad about myself. And it was a very sad story. It was like, okay. He's like, and I drank 2 bottles of wine and went on my merry way. So what? So the guy's a weird guy. Like, so this whole story
Yeah.
is weird, right? So kind of flags are going off. Like, this is like a odd person. The keys to his car have a thumb drive,
Hmm.
like a little thumb drive attached to it.
Yeah.
I'm like, and this one was like 10 years ago, so it wasn't as it was like kind of
Yeah.
weird. It's like
Right, right.
that's kind of like a little one like that with that many gigabytes. That must have been expensive. Um, and he also has a school to an elementary school in his back seat with a classroom circled and like a few different routes to the
Hmm.
classroom. So we're like, my sergeant sees it. He's like, He's like, why don't you bring him back to the booking room, start that, and I'll inventory the car, we'll search it and see what's going on. So I'm in the booking room with another cop. And the guy's like lighthearted. He's kind of at this point, he's kind of given up. One of those guys, once they're arrested, he's like, what am I gonna do? So
Right, exactly.
we're smoking and joking, and
Yeah.
he says his brother's an attorney, and like, is this if it goes to court, is all this gonna be aired in open court and blah blah blah? I said, well, I said it's gonna go in the report, but we typically don't stand there and read the report, but whatever the attorneys ask,
Right.
we do have to answer to. And he's like, oh boy. And so then the sergeant pops his head in the booking room. He's like, hey, Steve, can you come look at this? And it's I got something set up in the interview room for you. I'm like, sure. So I go in the interview room. There is no less than 50 dildos.
Oh.
2 of them are the type of dildos you screw on top of a champagne bottle.
Oh.
They have like a tube that goes through them.
Oh
Like
Lord.
you shake up. There's also
Oh.
a little pill container of amyl nitrate, like the party poppers, like big in the gay community.
Okay.
I didn't know what they were, but I knew they looked. He told me. He ended up telling me they're amyl nitrate. I'm like, what is that? He's like, you just pop them. He's like poppers. I'm like, so I'm looking at the drug classification book, when
Yeah.
he's all booked. I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? So I called the Provincetown sergeant because they have a lot of partying and drugs up there.
Yeah.
Huge gay community. And he goes, yeah, those are party poppers. They're popular in the gay community. They relax the anus. I'm like, he goes,
Oh.
they are, it's a class C. They're illegal. I'm like, okay, great. Added to
The
his,
charges. Yeah.
yeah. So, anyways, yeah, that that whole story with the dildos was insane. On the thumb drive, he had consent with safe consent, like release forms for any physical harm done to you,
Oh.
and also safe words like banana or mango or so we're just like, this is so weird. Um,
Oh my.
and it turns out the school, I just straight up asked him about the map to the school. I'm like, buddy, you understand how the circumstances look? He's like, oh yeah. I'm like, what does this map of the elementary school do in your car?
Yeah.
Why is this circled like this? And he's like, that's my daughter's school. It's a new school. I don't know. I have parent teacher conferences, and that was sent to me with multiple routes on how to get to the classroom when I arrived.
Oh.
I'm like, okay. So that was kind
Okay.
of I think a strange and bizarre one that I thought I thought about it years after. I'm just like, that was so weird. So
That's
horrible.
different. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's for sure. All right. Most intense.
Um, Probably I don't have a lot of running and gunning in my career, thankfully.
Well,
I've always
an
worked.
airplane going down, I think would be pretty damn intense.
Yeah, that was pretty intense. I did have a bad car crash, which really was maybe the most intense for me.
Mm,
I do it, like I said, I did have a recent one that involved some pretty extreme violence that ranks up there, but I can't talk about it
okay.
yet. But the car crash was spooky because I was on a call down the road for breaking and entering, so I'd been there, took photos, taking statements from the people who came home, found their house trashed, and a bunch of high value property was taken.
Yeah.
And I had prints and photos, just showed up. So the crime scene officer showed up. He's starting to do his thing, and we get this call, roll over on the highway. Um, Looks like a single occupant, not conscious. I'm like, all right. So I go to the crime scene officer. I'm like, hey, I got what I need. He's like, we'll arrange getting. I'll email you the stuff.
Yeah.
Take off. You got to go. So I go. My academy partner, guy I went to academy with and went to high school with, is already there. Sergeant's on his way. Um, there's a car, a Miata, Mazda Miata, and the highway kind of goes straight here, and then about 12 feet down, there's a retaining wall and this restaurant called
Uh-oh.
Poits. It's like a seasonal like arcade and mini golf.
Yeah.
So the car convertible like spiral flipped on the road and
Mm-hmm.
landed 12 feet down in a spot, perfectly like parked in a spot in front of Poits.
Oh wow.
And I can already see there's blood all the way up to the white trim on the top of Poits. Just,
Uh,
and I'm like, whoa. So I come bring my cruiser down the other exit to come in, and there's this couple standing there against the wall, and the woman is like green. No other way to describe it, like ashen green, just like
uh,
she's just in shock. This
yeah.
is a witness. And her husband's holding her, and he's like, we are both psychologists. We live in Boston. We were down here visiting friends, and we saw this happen, and we checked on her, and mm, my wife is very disturbed because I'm disturbed, but my wife is on the verge of passing out. Like she
Yeah.
just could not handle it. So, rightfully so. So the whole time, this car is parked in this spot. It's about 15 feet past them at the corner of the place, and Shania is playing loudly.
Okay.
It's a time of year when people have wood stoves, so wood stove smoke is coming down the highway from across residents across
Mm-hmm.
and kind of filling the scene. I'll never forget. Like whenever I smell a wood stove now, I'm like,
Oh yeah.
I love wood stove smell, but it always kind of like, oh yeah, that night. So as I get close to the car, Shania is blaring, CD player is still working somehow, and the girl's body is just it's just kind of arched back over the top of the seat. Unnaturally, she's
Mm-hmm.
like 22, 21. Um, there there is brain matter all over the hood. And she has a hole, like a perfect like hole in the top of her head. So what we figured out was she kept her seatbelt on, and when she rolled the Miata, she knocked the top of her head off. And as it
Oh.
rolled into the spot, it kind of flung stuff everywhere, So I'm stepping around and we're like, oh my gosh, there's like chunks of brain like
Oh,
everywhere.
yikes.
Sergeant shows up, we secure the whole thing. Me and my buddy are just kind of there looking at it like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. She's so young. Look at
Yeah.
that. Look at the hood. And the crazy thing is there's blood all over the front of up the building, brains all over her hood, not a speck of blood or brain on her. She's completely clean. Oh, the other
Wow.
thing I'll never forget is her back is kind of like broken over the top of the seat, like she slipped out of the seatbelt,
Yeah.
and there's just steam, like that fresh steam coming out of her mouth, like
Oh.
just almost like her spirit, like it's
Yeah.
coming out. So I ended up contacting the crime scene guy who was already at my other breaking and entering. He's
Hey,
like,
we got
I'll just
another
come.
job for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just save you the time. I'll come there. Accident recon is called the whole thing. Um, I'm with my sergeant. My buddy Josh is the initial response, so I walk over to the sergeant. He's kind of holding that scene, keep people away from the car. I go talk to the sergeant, and he's like, good friend of mine. He's been on the show, John Pierpont, great guy.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, our night's getting worse. I'm like, why is that? He goes, and this is like an hour into it.
Yeah.
He's like, she has a mom and her 4-year-old son that lives down the road, and they're asking where she is.
Oh.
So I need you to go there
Oh.
and tell her what happened, which was like maybe my second or third. No, at this point in my career, maybe I'd probably done a handful of death notifications. They
Yeah.
suck, obviously, just
Yes, they
on
do.
face value. Um, so I team up with it. It's in another community. So that officer teams up with me and we go over together. And, we tell the mom. And as we're telling the mom, here comes this 4-year-old out of the room,
Oh Lord.
complete with like a teddy bear and a blankie,
Oh.
like,
Oh.
and what's going on? She managed to put the kid to bed. And I'm like, I don't know. You can handle telling the kid. So we sit down with her and it's funny where people's brains go with trauma. She's
Hmm.
like one of the first things she says, she's clearly in shock. She's like, should I call in for work tomorrow? I should probably let my boss know. And I'm like, maybe. And it's pretty late, but, and then she snapped out of it and started crying and
Yeah.
all that other stuff. But, and the twist of it that like really got her was her daughter went to this Jamaican night party in our town that had DJs and booze and obviously everything. And she wanted to take her mom's Miata, because it's a cool car.
Yeah. It's
And her
convertible.
mom
Yeah.
like debated it and then was like, all right, you have the kid all the time. You want to let off some steam. You can take my convertible. And she had like a, big substantial SUV sitting there in the driveway, which definitely might have ruined the building, but probably she would have lived.
Yeah.
Especially if she had her seatbelt on. So for me, that one really bothered me. Like it really was like, this is like
Was
this sucks.
she intoxicated or
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. And that became a whole nother issue in investigating that restaurant for like, you know,
Over
why is she
serving.
this drunk? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So that was
Ah,
that.
all right. Well, let's move over to positive and heartwarming. What
Yeah,
kind of positive or heartwarming story do you have?
absolutely. And this is the one I wrote, and I got my balls busted relentlessly for this because they ask you to describe a situation kind of like this for LAPD, but they were, um, like I said, I think they were just assessing your grammatical skills, your
Yeah.
punctuation, want to make sure you could write. But I wrote out this whole story, and
Okay.
I didn't get to finish it because I didn't have enough time. They timed you.
Sure.
And later the manager's like, hey, whatever happened? Tell me the rest of the story. So we're getting these calls. Our chief of police is getting called by the highway superintendent. And he's going, listen, you got to put an extra patrol down in this part of town because there are an exorbitant amount of disgusting, chewed up, like little Debbie snacks all over the road every morning. And the people are getting pissed because they're going to walk their dogs. Their dogs are trying to eat it. Like there's a lot. So we need to, I know it's silly, but we need like an extra patrol for whoever's doing this littering because I'm getting tons of complaints. I have to
Yeah.
send a crew down there to clean up every morning. So that goes on for a couple of weeks. We do little extra patrols and stuff. And then one morning I'm down there, fresh dumping site of just chewed up little Debbie snacks, spit back into their cellophane, thrown on the side of the road for like a couple 100 feet. And it's odd. I'm like, is this a prank? Is someone screwing with us?
Yeah.
So while I'm off on the call, neighboring town calls and says, hey, give me a call on the cell phone. So I call their sergeant and he's like, hey, I think I might have a lead for you, believe it or not. He goes, I came across a young woman parked near one of our gyms on the side of the road, like, and she was like wildly chewing up Little Debbie snacks and spitting them into cellophane. And I'm like, uh, great. Who was it? So he gives me the name and the plate. I treat it like just like any investigation. I bring her in the PD, into the interview
Yeah.
room, flip on the
Nice.
recording, and I do a little ruse. I saw my opportunity to do like a real ruse because knowing she's a good natured person, she's young, not a criminal, no
Yeah.
record. Clearly, I'm thinking she's got some kind of problem. So she comes in and I say, and obviously, what is it? Littering from a motor vehicle? Like it's like not,
Yeah. Right.
what are you going to do with it? So I think there it was in town ordinance. So, um, I sit her down, interview her, and she's denying. And I go, listen, uh, I sent a bunch of these cellophane wrappers to the crime
Crime
lab
Lab. I knew
for
you were gonna say
yeah,
that.
for fingerprinting. And what if I were to tell you they all had your fingerprints on them? And she just broke down and admitted everything. So, I'm happy for that she admitted it, but at the same time, I'm like incredibly sad for her because then I'm like,
Yes.
why are you doing this? What is
Right.
happening? And she said, I used to be heavier and I lost weight by going to the gym. I go every day. I walk every day, but I have this compulsion. I think she was bulimic.
Oh, okay.
And now she's like, I wasn't getting the success I wanted and maintaining where I wanted to be. So I thought I could just chew it and taste it. And then, but she's like, there's so much shame involved. I just throw it out the window because I don't want to look at it anymore. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. So I put her in a program. I talked to my chief and say, listen, I caught the person. It's a young girl. She's got an eating disorder. And come to find out, it is a classified registered eating disorder. Chewing up and spitting out is part of
Okay.
bulimia. So I say, no charges. You got to meet with the DA. We need to know that you got help
Some help,
from
yeah.
a psychologist and that you're on a program and you're on the right path and this will just go away. Okay, I will do it, I promise. Never hear about it again, never hear from her. Um, Time goes by. I'm in California now, and this is like 4 or 5 years later. My mom calls me and she goes, "Hey, interesting story. Was getting my hair done today in the town she lives in." She's like,
Yeah.
and the woman doing my hair said, "You don't happen to be Officer Stephen Gould's mom?" And she said, "Yeah, actually, I am. That's my son. He lives in California now." And she said, "Well, I just want you to know that because your son caught me and forced me to get help, that I'm now engaged to the man I love and I
Uh-huh.
have a good job." And I was like, wow, that's unbelievable. That's a seemingly nothing case totally changed the trajectory of this girl's life.
I think there's a lot more of that in law enforcement, but you just never know. You never hear the end.
Yeah.
You know,
And I was so
that's
grateful she
awesome.
told my
Yeah.
mom, because she's probably embarrassed,
Sure. Sure.
but she's from all accounts from people, mutual friends that know her, great kid, great girl, living a good life now. So
Awesome. That's a
that was
good
my
that's a good way for us to wind this down here. Advice for new cops.
I would say, I mean, it's what a lot of people say, but I would definitely do a ride along. I would go to a place you want to work, do a ride along, even maybe do the cadet program if you're young enough, and see how you feel and how you react responding to an emergency, because it might not be what you think. Because I have seen people get into this line of work or go for ride-alongs and go, no, I
Sure.
I was a mess. My legs were jumpy. I didn't, but not in a good way. I wasn't excited. I was
Mm,
scared.
yeah.
And I didn't. My mouth was dry. The whole thing. Like I
Right.
just not for me because I think a lot of people, especially nowadays, we don't live on farms and we don't, bury our own. And grandpa's not dying in the house. Um, a lot of people are not seeing this stuff, and when they see it in the wild for the first time, it you might not be ready. It might not be something you actually want to do. So I would say ride-alongs and try to go to a place that'll actually put you in the car, put the vest on you, and let you go to calls.
That's awesome. Yes, absolutely. I second that. So what's next for you? A book? Another
Oh, brother,
podcast? What are we looking at?
I don't have the brain power for a book, I don't think, but I could self-publish one that will get 3 downloads. No, I think I'm going to keep plugging along with the podcast. I've really resolve to do it as steady as possible. You know, as you know, the podcast has benefits, like you said, but also detractions for the podcast are like just your time scheduling stuff, like
Yep.
trying to find people, trying to line up your schedule, making it work, editing, posting about it. Now we have to do short videos, like all of it's like if you're making this product like you do, that's a good product, well produced, great conversation. You want people to see it, you know? So
Yes.
you can't just do the podcast and go, let me just release this dove into the wild. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? It's like
exactly. Right.
it's no one's gonna find it. You have to be on your horse. You have to network and you have to get it out there. And that those are the challenges I face. So I'm not gonna be hard on myself about it. I'm gonna keep doing them. If I have a week where just no one's there or someone canceled, I'll maybe I'll post an old show or maybe I'll just come on and
Sure.
talk for 15 minutes, you know, so there's something there. But that's the game plan, just to keep going slow and steady. The
Okay.
numbers have been rising slow and steady. So, you know, ultimately, what a great retirement gig it would be if I
Oh yeah.
had retirement and I could supplement it with some money from just talking to the people I love most, other coppers. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That would be like
Absolutely.
a dream job.
Outstanding. So, where can people find you to learn more about you and your podcast?
Podcast is available on all major podcast platforms, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all the ones you can think of, and also thingspolicey.com. You can go there, especially if you want to be a guest or know somebody who should be a guest. You can scroll down and click be a guest. And yeah, there's a Facebook group and an Instagram account too. I'd appreciate, you know, just trying to build up those followers. So
Oh
if
yeah.
anybody thinks it sounds interesting or is interested, I would implore you to please check it out.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, Steve.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.